Hello and welcome to my tips and tricks tutorial for the dForce magnet. In this tutorial I'm going to walk you through the setup of the dForce magnet on a dress, and I'm going to show you how to handle morphed dresses and morphed figures. So I have prepared a little animation here for this figure. It's Genesis 8 female with my all-season dress on, and I want to move her into this pose. In frame 20, this is where she's going to pick up her dress, and then in frame 40 her hand is up here and she's going to drag the fabric up here, and the last 60 frames are just for the fabric to settle. Right. So the first thing is that I need to pick the vertex where I want her to pick up the fabric. Now, right now, this dress is without any simulation. This is just the conforming dress, and I have not adjusted anything. I could drag out these skirt parts here so it covers her legs entirely, but that's not necessary because I'm going to simulate it anyway. Fact is that right now it's not in a simulated state, it's not draped, so it's only guesswork where the fabric I want to pick will eventually be. So I'm going to simulate the dress first without any magnets attached to find the best spot to pick the vertex. This is a dForce dress, that means it's already set up to be used in a dForce simulation. And I can start the sim right now. I go here to my simulation settings tab, and I always switch off this one, start bones from memorized pose, because if I have her in zero pose in the first frame, like here, then it will start from this pose anyway. And if I have a different pose, I definitely do not want to use the memorized one. And I switch this to animated. Use timeline play range, and I hit simulate, and while it simulates I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, here I'm back. This took about 25 seconds to simulate, and I stopped it shortly after frame 20 because this is the moment where I want her to pick up the dress. So this is frame 20 is the frame where I want to pick my vertex. Right, so I select the dress, I have it selected, I go to my geometry editor tool, and I switch here to wire text shaded. You could also use wire shaded, just one of the wire modes, because that makes it easier to pick a vertex, because you can see the structure of the geometry. And I zoom in, and let's pick this vertex here. Okay, perhaps a bit too distant from her hand. This one. Okay. And I move back to frame 0. I go to my content library where I have the magnet presets. So I double click my magnet preset and it loads with the default settings. So I make that smaller. Size 4 is fine for me, and I rotate it around the Z axis. Here we go. And a little bit around the X axis. Like this. Okay, accept. And I have my magnet. One characteristic of the dForce magnet is that it attaches itself to the vertex you select in the basic shape of the object. So it looks up the base geometry in the library and uses this position to create its point. Now what happens when you use a morph? Let's try that. I'm going to delete this magnet here. And let's see what happens when I morph the figure. I go here and let's use the voluptuous morph that makes the figure bigger here in the waist and hip area. And especially for this demonstration, I also have created an additional dress morph that makes the skirt wider to have even more difference to the original shape. So I go here again, I select my geometry editor tool, and when I create the magnet now, you can see that it sticks inside the fabric. That is not a problem, it needs to be created in this original position, so hit accept. Now one thing to consider is that with the wider dress shape, with this wide skirt, the fabric will drape differently. So I'm going to delete the magnet and I will run the simulation again to find the optimal position for the vertex. If you know right from the start that you're going to use a morphed figure or a morphed dress, of course you can skip the first step, you don't have to simulate it without the morph, you can start right away with a morphed figure. I'm starting the simulation and again I'm going to pause the recording. Right, I'm back and I go back to frame 20 because I wasn't fast enough to stop it in time, so it ran a bit longer. And I select the dress again, select my geometry editor tool, and yes, you can see that the vertex is in a different position. That was the one I picked previously, so I'm going to pick another one, a different one. This one here, let's check from the back, perhaps that one. Okay, this is the vertex I want to use. I move the slider back to frame 0 and I go to my library and I create my magnet. The position, that is the rotation and orientation, is okay. I hit accept and now I have created my magnet. I select the dress again because now it's especially important I know and I remember where that vertex is, so I can put the magnet into the right spot. So I select my dress and the vertex is still selected. And I go to my tool settings and I switch to this mode, to the polygon mode, and I keep my eyes on that vertex so I can find the spot, and I know it is this polygon. The vertex is here at the bottom right corner, and I scroll down here until I find my selection, that is selection sets it's called. Right click, create selection set from selected, and I call it marker. And this will not interfere with your surfaces or anything else. And now I can use this eye symbol to hide that polygon. And this is my marker, so I know where the vertex is. It's this bottom right one. This is where the magnet needs to attach. So I select the magnet, I select the universal tool, because that's the most handy tool for changing position in a quick and efficient way. And I move it out here so it attaches to this vertex. Okay, it doesn't need to be 100% precise. In my experience, it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 2 millimeters off. It's just about, it should be about right. Okay, now when I move this slider, you can see that the fabric drapes, and this marker polygon is still invisible, so I can use that as a guide so I know where to place my magnet. So I move 5 frames forward and I position my magnet. Another 5 frames. Sometimes it can be easier if you hide the figure so it's not in the way. And I like to do it in bigger steps first. So you can see I've jumped from frame 10 to frame 20. I adjust the magnet. And then I go back to see, and I notice that it follows that polygon quite nicely, so I don't have to put in any adjustment frames in between. And frame 20 is already the frame where the dForce magnet will start its independent movement. So I don't have to do that polygon following any longer. I only check the first frames because at the beginning it needs a little bit more precision because the fabric moves more at the start of an animation. Okay, this is quite far off. Now this looks a bit fiddly, but when you've done it once or twice, you will see that you get a feeling for where you need to put in the adjustments. So that looks quite good already. I'm going to leave it at that. And then in frame 20 I make my figure visible again. And now I pose the magnet so it follows the hand. I also use this occasion to check that the hand is not moving inside the fabric. So yes, it passes here with a little bit of space in between, that's good. Okay, so frame 25, and I move my magnet here. Frame 30. Frame 40. Usually the quickest way is to use one of the side views and a top or bottom view and position this center icon in between her fingers, because that's where you want the fabric to go. Let's check frame 35. Yes, that's good. That needs some more adjustment here. Okay. So I zoom out and I check the animation. Okay, that's going to work. And I will make one more change. I select the figure, I go to the content library, and I use the subfolder of my dForce magnet, and I apply a one of the collision presets. It's the right hand, and I choose ignore right hand. So this will switch off the simulation visibility for this hand. That means that during the simulation the hand is ignored. The fabric will not collide with this hand. If the magnet moves the fabric through the fingers or the palm, then it would create a dForce explosion, otherwise the simulation would fail. By excluding the hand, by ignoring the hand in the simulation, I can prevent this problem. I go to my simulation settings tab, and again I start the simulation and pause the recording. Okay, I'm back, and this took about 67 seconds to simulate, so slightly more than a minute. And I can see that I have a little bit of poke through here. Let's see if that is the preview mode. It's still here in texture shaded, so I select the dress and I go here to mesh smoothing and I enable smoothing. So here we are, and she is picking up the fabric. So all I need to do is perhaps adjust the hand pose so she grabs the fabric better, or I could adjust the magnet's pose and move it a bit further up between her fingers. So that's yeah, that depends on what works best for your particular scene. Now this animation was done with the figure at a 0 position, so there is no translation or rotation applied. When you want to move her to a different spot in her scene, I recommend setting up the simulation first. Let it calculate the drape, and then move it, rotate it, put it wherever you want in your scene, and the simulation will follow. So when I move the figure now, or I rotate it, you will see that the draping is still in place. So you might think, okay, that's all right for a still render to move her in the last frame, but what is if I want to start my animation with the figure in a different pose or in a different position in my scene? Now that's a valid question. And let's go to the first frame and let's see what happens if I change her position and rotation here. Now let's move her away from the center point, and let's rotate her. And you can see that the magnet follows the dress nicely, because as soon as the magnet is set up, it attaches itself to the skirt, it's parented to the dress, to the clothing, or to the hair, or whatever item you use, and it will move with it. If I picked a new vertex now, sorry, wrong mode, vertex mode. If I pick this vertex now with the figure rotated and translated, it still creates in its relative position to the original geometry. You still need to move the magnet out, but only a little bit to compensate for the difference between the base shape and the morphed shape. So you could now start to set up the animation of this second magnet. But keep in mind, when you create that magnet, it will create itself in the original position of the mesh. So when you have a morph or any change applied, you will have to take that into account and move it later, as soon as it's created, to the place where the vertex is in the morphed shape. So you can see it's quite forgiving as far as the figure's position is concerned, but what you shouldn't do is use it on an already posed figure. For example, when the figure has, let me select her leg, and I bend it, and now I pick a vertex here and I create the magnet. Now you can see it's far away from the vertex. If I hit accept now, where is my magnet? It's down here. And when you start the simulation now, this is not going to work. So you need to make sure that the magnet is close to its vertex. So I would need to move that up here if I really wanted to start with that pose. Let's see where that vertex is. So it's that one. I can edit here, assign selected to set. Okay. Now I can go and pose my magnet so it fits this particular vertex. However, this is a case you will encounter rarely. You will usually want to start a simulation in the default position. So if I start my simulation now, it will start from this pose because I have this one switched off. It's not going to start from the memorized pose. It's going to use the pose I have set at the beginning of the animation. So this works because I've moved the magnet out here. You can see that the skirt has a weird shape, and this is because it was distorted to begin with. If I go back here, you can see there are some JCMs changing the skirt's shape, because this is not draped, this is caused by the bones and the rigging of this dress. Otherwise it wouldn't fit round the figure. And this changes the skirt's shape in a way that it does not use the original shape of the skirt anymore. To get a good draping result, you should always start at the zero pose, or with something very close to the zero pose. So I'm going to delete this. Oh no, that was not what I intended. Let's undo that. I wanted to delete this keyframe for the die. So where are we? Now this needs to be 0, 0, 0. Okay, here we go. You can see if something goes wrong with the simulation, the magnet will distort, and that's not a good sign. That might cause the simulation to fail. And in this case it happened because I didn't adjust the first magnet to the pose with the leg up. So make always sure that the magnet is near its vertex where it belongs. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and I hope that it will help you to have more fun with the dForce magnet. Thanks for watching.